Welcome to the Only God Stories podcast, where we believe testimonies are powerful. In this podcast, your faith will be built as we hear from people from all walks of life who recognize the power of God in their lives. To hear more testimonies or for the opportunity to share a story of your own, check us out on our website at onlygodstories.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Only God Stories podcast. My name is Joseph, and I'm so glad you're here today. I'm joined with my beautiful wife, Tiffany, who's going to be with us as we get a chance to dive in and talk with a special guest named Quinn Muccio. Now, Quinn is one of those men that the more you talk to him, the more you realize that there's so much that he has to offer to the world, and even just personally, he is a great person to be able to be around. He's overcome just great adversity, even at a very young age. But that didn't really stop him becoming a published author as a teenager. And that is just the beginning of his story. And there's so many different directions today that we could go. But Quinn, welcome to the Only God Stories podcast.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, Quinn, I know that there's a lot of our listeners, and they may not really know your story, who you are, or anything like that, even though we've got the privilege to kind of know that. And be journeying with you for a while. But can you just share a little bit more about yourself and catch the audience up on who is Quinn Muccio?
Yeah. So I was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas, lived in Dallas most of my childhood. And then I have 3 siblings, and I'm now majoring in creative writing at the University of Arkansas.
That's
And
great.
Quinn, we've been able to get to know you through our church and through small groups for college-age students. And I just have to say, I'll add on to Joseph's intro of you. It's been so fun getting to know Quinn. He is
Yes.
one that, man, like as somebody who has young kids, like if they turned out like Quinn, I would be a happy person.
It's true.
I've told him before, he has so much grit. He has so much faith, and he's just doing life the right way. So I'm thankful to know Quinn. And when I think about you, Quinn, something that you shared with us not too long ago was just an article, even just about you and your birth and your story from a very young age. Because Joseph even said you had a lot of odds stacked against you. You had a lot of adversity in your life. And I would just love for you to bring in the listeners to how did your life start? Some of that story. Like I know people who are walking out very similar situations right now who could really use some encouragement from a story like yours.
Yeah. So I was born at 26 weeks. I weighed 2.5
Ooh,
pounds.
wow.
I had NEC, which is an intestinal disease. I had a stroke, and they said that I wouldn't be able to use the right side of my body. I had a fourth
Wow.
grade brain bleed, and the doctor
Goodness.
said it
Yeah.
would affect my hearing and vision, uh, and I would have been fed through a feeding tube. That,
Wow. Wow.
uh,
And how tall are you now, Quinn?
I am
You're
s- I'm 6'1".
you're
Goodness.
6'1". You're not short.
No.
I I
What
have
I
to
would give
say,
to be
like,
6 foot tall, everybody, just so everybody knows, I'm not.
oh man, again, you do in fact see me right now. You do in fact hear, like, you do have all of your, like, you're good.
Your
Like
motor
you have,
functions are great. Yeah.
yeah. So I also just want to ask, like, how did your parents even get through that, or like, just let us in a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I think they were, the doctors had said that, just to pull the plug, and
Mm.
Oh
my
man.
parents were like, we're gonna let him fight it out and trust God in this. And so that was, I think it really strengthened their faith and encouraged them. And the cool thing is that I went back to my local NICU,
Mm.
um, and the summer before college, and they have this picture with me, and on this, with my story on it, and they that apparently for the past 19 years, when people walk down that hallway, they they share my story, and so it's just
Wow.
crazy.
Good grief.
So
Praise
powerful.
God.
No, I'm telling you, like, when I say I know people walking out similar stories, I know of somebody. I have a friend on Facebook. We have friends on Facebook who they have a baby who preemie, intestine issues with a brain bleed, and they're currently watching some miracles happen in that baby's life. And so, yeah, I know that there are people listening who've either walked similar paths or
Hmm.
are walking through something now. And I mean, Quinn's amazing. He is one of the best young men we know, and man,
That's true.
there's so much hope. God is good. God is good even in those hard times.
Yes.
For
Well,
sure.
I love just how much how they're continuing to tell a story that you or your parents wouldn't have scripted or written, but it is a story that God has written, and I just love how He continues to get the glory, and you overcome significant odds, and I have to think like just from the way you started there. One, I even have to go back to. I love that you went back to the NICU, that you went back to be
Mhm.
able to show gratitude, went back to be able to see even just what you've overcome. But I'd love to know just with such a challenging but a victorious origin story, like how does that really affect the way that you look at life and just knowing that God's on your side? Like, what does that do for you? Being a college student, you're going into your sophomore year in college. Like, what does that mean for you?
Well, I uh, look at the verse Joshua 1:9. I have not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And it
Yeah.
helps me when I feel discouraged or it reminds me that God's got everything under control
Yeah,
and even and to go through hard things.
Mhm. I also just have to add, I really find it comical. I'm gonna circle back to you going back to the NICU and how they share your story, because it's essentially a, "Hey, here's the story that we actually got wrong." Like,
yeah,
we said
that's so
pull the
true.
plug. Like,
Uh,
so just whoever needs this word, what a doctor says is not the end all be all.
yeah,
And no matter what you're going through, and God still moves, God still works, God still performs miracles.
that's
So
right.
I feel like that's a word for somebody out there today. But I love how they use your story for a story of hope, even though like they were completely wrong. And
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love
praise
that.
God.
And just talking about how you, like, really see your life, I think that that's an amazing verse for you, and I can see that play
Hmm.
out. I've
Yeah,
already said how you have so much grit, and so, I mean, courageous. You've done some pretty amazing things when, for at a very young age, and I want people to know, like, he's done well, I'll share a story, and then we'll get into a little bit more. I remember talking to Quinn one day, it was the night we met, and you said something about Henry Winkler and talking to Henry Winkler on the phone because Quinn has some dreams that he'll share about in a moment.
hold on,
And
Tiffany. What if
I'm gonna
somebody doesn't
explain
know
who
who
it is.
Henry
I will
Winkler is?
explain,
All
and I'm gonna
right.
hit both generations right here.
Okay, all right. Go
Gen
ahead.
X, I got you. Millennials, I got you too.
What
Gen
about Gen
Z, I
Z?
think you even have some knowledge of one of these. So for my Gen X and above, Fonzie from Happy
Hey,
Days,
hey.
they're all probably thinking, "I didn't need help. I knew who Henry Winkler was." They're all
Uh,
thinking, "I went to get a library card when he did." Google it. It's a pretty cool story. So that's our Gen X and above. Millennials and below, Parks and Rec, he played the dentist dad of
that's
the
true.
brother and sister who were, like, crazy. I forget their names, but yeah, so he played the dentist dad on Parks and Rec. So see, we just covered all
There you go.
generations. That's who Henry Winkler is, and if you haven't watched
Parks and
either
Rec.
show,
Whew.
I'm sorry, you
Yeah.
should at least
Ron
watch a few
Swanson.
episodes of
Hmm.
both. Start if Parks and Rec, start season 2. I
There you go.
digress.
All right.
So, Henry Winkler, and I'm like, "Wait a second," because I grew up watching Happy Days, and I have watched Parks and Rec. I know who Henry Winkler is. And I'm like, "How in the world did you get on a phone call with Henry Winkler?" And he goes, "I wrote him a letter."
Well,
It's
I actually didn't.
amazing.
I didn't get on the phone. That I
Oh,
when I
okay.
met. Yeah. So I sent him
Okay.
a letter to the.
But you wrote him a letter, but he was able to get back to you.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
He was very encouraging, and he said because I had sent him a log line, and he had makes us say good luck with whatever you do, and so that was really encouraging just to have that.
Mhm.
And he sent me something. He sent me a signed Henry Winkler or a signed Fonzie picture that I didn't even ask for. Like that's how nice this guy is.
Oh my gosh, that's
That's super
awesome.
cool.
So see, but even then, I obviously got my details wrong and mixed up. However, like, I just think it's so awesome. So, I mean, there are a lot of people out there who would never write somebody a letter like that thinking that they would actually get a response. And as you hear more of Quinn's story, you'll know why this is important to him or why he would write that letter. And Quinn, I'd just love for you to share with everybody some dreams that you've had for a long time. And I know you're young, but you've had these dreams for a long time, and they're definitely God given dreams.
Yeah.
So if you could share a little bit about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So junior year of high school, I had sent Henry Winkler a letter um, because I had been developing a spin-off series for the original MacGyver, uh, and I sent him a little log line of which is it's basically like a synopsis of what happened and whatever, because he executive produced the original series.
Which I did not know.
I was going to say also
I mean,
thank
I
you for
knew I
explaining what
knew
a log line is for me.
I knew that he was attached some way. I did not remember that he was a, producer of it, and so for MacGyver, it's one of the another show from back in the day that was very popular for its
I love
time,
MacGyver.
and, yeah, obviously, it's a great era right now for some spinoffs of some shows like that. But go ahead, keep going, Quinn.
Yeah. And with Henry Winkler's encouragement, I had said, I need to go reach out to some talent agencies and see if I can get rep. Um, and so I had made a list of 100 talent agencies to call and email. Only two got back to me, and they both said no. So,
Hmm.
but you just keep going. And senior year of high school, I was working at this grocery store and in the produce department. And this guy at the produce department, I was sharing, my story and what I was doing, and he knew Lee Gabler, who, if you don't know who Lee Gabler is, he was the chairman of the Creative Arts Agency, which is a big talent agency. Um,
Mhm.
and his wife, Elizabeth, she is the president of Sony 3000 Pictures.
Wait,
Uh,
yeah, that's amazing. Both of those.
and he basically the guy who I was talking with, he basically said, if you need an agent, I'll help you. And I had completely forgotten about it until I was writing all this stuff down for the podcast. And so I hadn't touched it, and I just remember it was like, oh wow, there we go. Um, and then I got to college and I had the script, but I was like, I really, I just want to not do anything with this. And so I decided just to show it to my grandparents before I just gave up on it because
Mhm.
nothing was happening. And it turns out the day after I show my grandparents, my grandpa has this lunch with this guy he had known for years, and they had been talking, and he had brought up the script, and as a good grandfather does,
Yeah, of
helping out
course.
his
Mhm.
grandson.
Gotta
Yep.
brag on the grandkids. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, well, also, like, how many grandparents out there has God used in their grandchildren's lives? Like, even if it's just the faithful prayers of a grandparent,
It's true.
like, goodness, they like, God grandparents are God's gift to humanity for sure.
Yeah.
for sure. And so this guy, his daughter-in-law was a film producer for Paramount, and so I'd sent her this, and
So he's
it
just randomly talking to this guy.
I've never met people like this in my life, I don't believe.
That's
Go
so cool
go
of God. Go ahead, keep going,
go God.
Quinn.
All right,
yeah.
go Quid.
And so I had sent her the script, and I waited 8 months, and she had responded and gave me some tools and resources, um, and which was really neat. But she said she didn't work in television; she worked in film. Um, and so a couple months go by. Someone wanted my grandfather's business advice, and so he came down. And since I'm living with him, I got to talk with this guy, and he was a writer, and he had God-given dreams as well to go do things in the industry, the film industry, and he like asked me what I was interested in. I said, "Oh, I'm writing this script and whatever." And he said, "You know who I know? I know the CEO of Warner Brothers, David Zaslav. And I will if you get good coverage, I will introduce you." And it's just it's
Amazing.
and so um he said, "You should get coverage on the script and whatever." And so I reached out to this screenwriter. He was a very, you know, very prominent screenwriter, and he had done a bunch of projects. He had done NCIS New Orleans and a bunch of other things.
Goodness.
Um, and so I reached out to him, and he agreed to do a Zoom call with me, and he read the script, and he said that he said it was great, and he said he would be willing to get me an agent, which was nice. Um, and then I decided on a whim to, with all this excitement and whatever building up, that I should email the creator of MacGyver, Lee David Zlotov. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he responded, and
Us
um,
see?
yeah, yeah,
Follow your dreams, people.
Come
Like,
on.
Quinn's amazing. Take his
no,
lead.
yeah. He anyway, he responded. I was telling him sort of what I was trying to accomplish, and he was very encouraging. But he was also being realistic, which was nice. But he said, "Go for it," um, and he said he was very impressed with I. But he said he couldn't read the script because he owned part of the rights to MacGyver, and
Mm.
so it was
Legal
the
things.
legal and agent, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so I researched the. I go on Richard D. Anderson's website, which, if you don't know who Richard D. Anderson is, he is
Never
MacGyver.
heard.
He's the
Hmm.
original MacGyver.
The MacGyver.
Yes, the MacGyver. And I go on his website and I'm looking, and because I've always wanted to meet him, and I thought, oh, this would be great if I could meet him. And it turns out he had a convention in Pittsburgh. And so I go and fly out with my grandpa and my dad to go to Pittsburgh. And this convention has a trillion people, so many people dressed up
It's a
in,
lot of people. Yeah.
a lot of people. Um, and so we show up really early, to get in line. And he apparently didn't show up till 1, because we didn't know that. I'm waiting in line for like hours, and then he pauses to go take pictures. And so I go, and thankfully my grandpa was standing in line for the pictures, um, so I could get a spot and get a picture. And so I go get pictures with him, and then I go back in line, almost get up there to the line, and then he is supposed to go eat dinner and then go and
Oh
do
Goodness.
no.
a panel, go do a panel. And
Ugh.
so we go get out of line, go watch the Richard Anderson panel. And what he had done is he had broken the rules and given us numbers in line. I think I was number like 7 or something in line, because people were frustrated that people would cut and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he wasn't actually supposed to do that, but he did it anyway, which was really nice of him.
Very MacGyver-esque.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
I'm
big
gonna
guy.
do my own thing.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
gonna do what I can with the tools I have. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so we go back. I get in line, and I'm sweating. I'm like, oh my gosh, like if he doesn't, if he doesn't like it, then it's like it's over,
It's done.
and it's done. And so I get up to the table, and my hands are shaking. Like it was so terrifying. And then he was just so nice and so calm. And I kind of just told him, how long I've been working on it, um, and how I just would like him to at least be willing to read it. And he
Yeah.
said, just stand over there. And so here I am. I'm waiting, 3 more hours. It's now 10 o'clock.
Goodness gracious.
No,
That's a long day.
a long day. Yeah. No one else is there except for Richard, his person who he was working through, um, the guy who ran the convention, me and my grandpa, and my dad. So it was just us. And
Wow.
I had
Wow.
15 minutes with Richard E. Anderson privately, and I sort of pitched him the concept, and he seemed kind of interested in it, which was nice. He said, "Yeah, send me the script." And the cool thing was, because the reason I went to the convention was to go get a script signed, and earlier that day I had met by accident a guy who did the Making Fun of MacGyver podcast,
Huh.
and the person who runs Richard D. Anderson's website. And the person who ran his website, she asked if I collected the scripts, because I had one in my hand that I was kind of showing her what I would share with Richard.
Hmm.
And she asked if I collected them, and I said, yeah, I do. And she said, well, I got 30 of them I was just going to throw away. Do you want
Oh
them?
goodness.
And I said, sure. And so I paid for the shipping and I got her email and everything, and uh, a week goes by, and she emails me and tells me that the day after the convention, her and Richard were hanging out, and Richard had said to her how impressed he was with what I had done and everything, which was
Wow.
So
really
good.
encouraging. Uh,
That's cool.
yeah,
It's
and
one thing it's one thing for him to talk about that, like, with you and encourage
Of
you.
course.
That's, like, a whole other level that, like, the next day it was on his mind, and he went and talked to somebody else about it. Like, that's impressive.
and she had shared, that she was gonna send me the scripts and whatever, and he offered to sign them all. So I now have 30 signed MacGyver scripts.
I would like to borrow one script. Just kidding.
Yeah, sorry, they're collector's items now.
If
Yeah, they
if we
are.
see if we see one pop up on eBay, we'll blame
Yeah,
Joseph.
exactly.
Yeah, blame just no, I'm not. She said no eBay, so
Yeah,
yeah,
no eBay.
No
no eBay.
eBay.
But the cool thing was after that convention, a month later, I had found out that Richard went to a Comic-Con event in Germany, and he had shared a little bit about, MacGyver rebooting, and he said, he seems interested in it if the opportunity ever arose, which was nice. And it was just neat, to see him on stage talking. Like I didn't even expect that to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. So cool,
Quinn, I know
Quinn.
that's still a journey that's going on. Like you're still in
Yeah,
that process,
yeah,
well within the process, and you've done countless revisions. What I love, there's so many things in just what you've shared already that I love is even at the beginning you said, I was thinking about the podcast, I began to remember like all the different moments that I had
Yes,
and
I
yeah,
what
caught
God
that
was
too.
doing, and really that's the purpose of this podcast. If you
Right.
want to know why we're on this podcast, it's so that way we can remember God's goodness and his faithfulness to us, so that way we can remember for ourselves and for our kids and for our grandkids, and we can continue to tell the stories of God being faithful. And if you're
Yeah.
like me, I can forget a lot of times about God's faithfulness and how he's been faithful in the past and how he's going to
Mhm.
continue to be faithful. And so I love that you mentioned that. But I hope that you see something really specific within this story as you guys are listening or watching, is that Quinn has a grit to him, that says, "Hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be able." Quinn, I don't know if you realize this. This is what I realize in this on this interview right now, is that you are in essence MacGyvering the MacGyver script because you're
Yeah.
taking what are the resources that I have, and then how can I maximize that to hit the goal. And
Mhm.
if you haven't ever seen MacGyver, that's in essence what happens. But most of the time it's with a paperclip. So,
Yeah.
um, but but what I love is that you've just shown grit all along the way, and you continue to be able to pursue those things, even though it's not quite done yet. Like, what
yeah.
kind of encouragement would you give to somebody that is they've got a big dream and it may take years to prepare for? What would you say to somebody like that?
I would just say, you gotta endure and press through, and God will give you strength. I think we're not always equipped for whatever we ask for,
Mm,
Yeah.
and, and so through the preparation and the time, God will not only do the thing, He'll do stuff within you, and so I've seen myself and my character grow and my faith grow, and so
mm,
there's so much more to that, than just doing the thing.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
it the verse that reminds me of that is Philippians 2:13. Uh, for it is God who does work in you both in will and work for His good pleasure. And so I think that you
Mm,
know it's hard sometimes to trust God, especially when you've been working on something for a long time. You just gotta
yeah.
trust and push through it. God's got you.
Yeah, God's got you. That's what I think whenever I think of your life, Quinn. And I mean, your life started with just an only God story, defeating the odds, and
Yeah.
definitely miracles happening when doctors said pull the plug. Sometimes only God stories look like that. Sometimes they look like a whole lot of mini stories, which is really what the story is that you're walking out right now. It's a
Yes.
ton of mini stories that are going on in your life, and I cannot wait to see the result of those in your life. And I would encourage everybody, especially the ones with those big dreams, that Joseph and Quinn are talking about right now, that sometimes it doesn't look like a big, huge step, like,
Yeah.
coming up in a big leap. Sometimes it's just a lot of little movements of God, and
Yeah.
let those build your faith and write those down so that way you don't forget about them. Remember those because there's gonna be times, especially with big dreams, where you feel defeated, you feel like you are not good enough, you feel like it's never gonna happen. You
Yeah.
have to remember all those little moments because those little only
It's
God
true.
stories, those micro only God stories are gonna pull you through if you choose to remember them.
For sure.
I think that's really good wisdom, and there is a lot of really good nuggets that were in there. And one thing that I love that you highlighted, Quinn, is that it's about the journey, not the destination, and what God wants to do in you. Oftentimes we see these moments where somebody catches what we'd call a big break, and they're like, "Ah, that guy had a big break. That girl had a big break. It came out of nowhere." And the person with the big break is like, "No, like, it actually was years and years of whatever that thing is, the discipline, the
Chris
hard work, the no's, like,
Yeah,
what do you got?"
Christine Kane, she said it, and I'm pretty sure she said it on her podcast too. But Christine Kane has said, "Yeah, people say, where'd you come from? You came from you came out overnight as this huge, Christian women speaker, all the things." And she's like, "Yeah, it was a very long 27-year overnight. Like
Yeah,
it
exactly.
took a lot of time."
Yeah. Well, Quinn, you have definitely encouraged and built our faith today. I will say that for for me, you talk about meeting all these people. I'm like, I'm just at your age. I was just waiting tables, and I may meet somebody that worked for Kraft. Like that's about the most extensive my connections would get. Um, hey, but once again, I hope that as you guys are listening, that you hear that you can be resilient and you can have the grit to be able to pursue big dreams from God. And there's some ups and downs, and you may need
Yeah.
some equipping along the way, so that way you can fully fulfill what God's asked you. But one thing is certain is that God's given us all a dream and anointed us just for that. And so I encourage you continue to pursue that dream. Quinn, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We're so grateful for you, and we will be your continual cheerleaders all along the way. So, hey, listeners, we'll see you guys in about 2 weeks, and we can't wait to have you back again.
Thank you for listening to the Only God Stories podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media as we share more stories like these, and don't forget to check out our website at onlygodstories.org for more information on how you can share how the power of God has moved in your life.